The deportations continue. The latest subject was a Lebanese doctor and Brown University professor who was here on an H-1B visa. President Trump's Department of Homeland Security says that Dr. Rasha Alaweya openly admitted to supporting a leader of the terrorist organization Hezbollah. DHS says that Alaweya even attended the leader's funeral. Homeland Security said in a statement, a visa is a privilege, not a right. Glorifying and supporting terrorists who kill Americans is grounds for visa issuance to be denied. This is common sense security.
The professor's lawyer said, quote, "We're not going to stop fighting to get her back in the United States to see her patients where she should be. And we're going to try to make sure that the government follows the rule of law."
A federal judge had ordered her to stay in the country for a hearing, but then abruptly canceled it on Monday at the request of her legal team.
Meanwhile, debate is erupting over whether the Trump administration is defying court orders. The administration deported 250 alleged Tren de Aragua members to El Salvador this weekend.
President Trump invoked the Alien Enemies Act to carry out these deportations. A federal judge, however, had ordered that the planes should be turned around and for the administration to pause deportation initiatives under that act. The DOJ argued that they complied with the judge's written order since they didn't remove the 5 Venezuelans who had sued over their potential deportations. On the other hand, the DOJ also said that the judge's oral directive was not enforceable. The DOJ said that the flight had already taken off by the time the judge issued his injunction.
The district judge, James Basberg, said, "The idea that because my written order was pithier, it could be disregarded, that's one heck of a stretch, I think." The judge continued, quote, "Isn't then the better course to return the planes to the United States and figure out what to do than say, we don't care, we'll do whatever we want?"
Here's White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller responding to whether the administration violated the order.
The President of the United States and his administration reserve all rights under the Constitution to conduct national security operations in defense of the United States. The Alien Enemies Act, which was passed into law by the founding generation of this country, men like John Adams, was written explicitly to give the President the authority to repel an alien invasion of the United States. That is not something that a district court judge has any authority whatsoever to interfere with, to enjoin, to restrict, or to restrain any way. You can read the law yourself. There's not one clause in that law that makes it subject to judicial review, let alone district court review.
The last time the Alien Enemies Act was enacted was during World War II.
Trump just called the judge a radical left lunatic in a Truth Social post on Tuesday. He said the judge should be impeached and emphasized that he was just doing what voters wanted. Founders of voting rights platform Democracy Docket, Mark Elias, wrote on Blue Sky, "Whether Judge Basberg was correct on the law is largely irrelevant to whether the government is in contempt for willfully disobeying it. If the Trump administration knew there was an order from a federal judge and then willfully violated it, that is the end of the analysis." Meanwhile, Senator Chuck Grassley wrote on X, "Another day, another judge unilaterally deciding policy for the whole country, this time to benefit foreign gang members. If the Supreme Court or Congress doesn't fix, we're headed toward a constitutional crisis, and a Judiciary Committee take action." What do you think about this, Marianne?
What I think about this is that all Americans, no matter who we are, Venezuelan gang members out. We have no problem with that.
Yes.
The issue here is the rule of law. The issue here is due process.
And
Chuck
attending
Grassley
terrorist
is a
funerals.
U.S. Senator. He should know that the judiciary is a co-equal branch of government. You and I were talking about the incendiary talk of the president. For him to get on Twitter and X, and to say that the judge, because he disagreed with him, is a radical left lunatic and should be impeached, just shows what the president is doing here. He's trying to get the American people to withhold their allegiance to the constitutional principles, in this case, co-equal branches of government. Regardless of what Caroline Leavitt says, who obviously does not know the Constitution, yes, absolutely, a district court judge says, I want to make sure due process was shown here. And then if the White House then wants to come back, appeal that, it goes to higher judges all the way up to the Supreme Court. That's why our system, without that, we do have dictatorship. Without that, we do have authoritarianism. So nobody here is saying, let's not get rid of violent gang members. We are saying, however, that there's a very good chance that some of those people were not necessarily anything like that, and that due process must be given to everyone. Without that, American freedom is in danger.
Right. They don't have the right. I mean, they're all illegal immigrants, right? They should be.
Some might be undocumented. I don't know.
Yeah.
They
Well, they're all. I mean, we should not be deporting American citizens.
But this is disappearing people, Robby.
Well, it's removing
people
from the country who have no legal right to be here and who the government says are part of a violent criminal gang that you agree should be gone. And now that should be consistent, I agree, with due process.
Thank you.
Court orders should never be ignored.
Undocumented people also have the right to due process.
Yes.
That's what's important.
Well, it's important to...
And that's all that judge was trying to say. That judge wasn't saying, bring them all back, send them back home to their apartments.
Well, I mean, he was literally saying, bring them all back.
But he said, bring them all back and let us have due process. That's all he was saying.
I want to do due process first so that we just have one plane flight. I actually don't like the idea of the planes taking them there. Maybe this is just me as a passenger who doesn't like when the plane has to turn around, but it has to be incredibly wasteful of our money and resources to fly them there, then have to fly them back, then have to do it again. So let's have due process. Let's figure out who these people are. Let's deport them legally through the process with particular emphasis on violent gang members and their associations. We agree on that.
Okay, and if you have to turn a plane back in order to protect constitutional principle, I as a taxpayer have no problem with that.
That's not what I was saying. I was saying, but let's do it right so that we don't have to turn it around.
Well, that's why what they're talking about today is what time did those planes take off in relation to the time at which the president said that. I mean, the judge said, we're not going to do it that way. And of course, now they're saying, well, he only said it verbally, he didn't write it, which is another absurdity that the administration is trying to come forth. And I think what the American people need to understand is, you know, Robby, all of this conversation has to do with, are we going with democratic constitutional principle, or are we going with
Marianne,
dictatorship and authoritarianism?
Don't you think the American people who have voted have indicated so clearly, have spoken with such passion in both Republicans and Democrats, that they think there is way too much illegal immigration, that they have a big problem with it, that is like the reason or one of the top 3 reasons Democrats have lost the faith of the American people, because they didn't do enough to get violent illegal immigrants out of this country. The American people have said we want more done. So while the American people, I'm sure, want democracy and the rule of law followed, and I do as well, and I'm for that, to be clear, don't you think some people hear this and react with some frustration? We can't even put illegal gang members on a plane and send them to a country that wants to take them back without some judge saying, oh no, you didn't follow all the proper procedures, we got to do it over. Don't you think there's some frustration on the American people's part that not even this can be dealt with without a million bureaucratic hoops to jump through?
First of all, it's a falsehood to indicate that no Democratic presidents were also deporting people. Obama was called deporter-in-chief.
No, he deported tons of people.
Yeah, absolutely he did. So this is not about that. And I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that too many Americans did not study American history, American civics, and American government.
I don't think you got ahead by calling the American people uninformed.
Because, pardon?
Are you calling the American people uninformed?
I'm not calling the American people are not a monolith. I'm saying too few Americans are soberly considering the balances that we have to take into account here. I don't want violent gang members from Venezuela or Mexico or anywhere else not to be sent back. That's not the issue here. The issue is that I want due process. I want governance by law and rule of law, and that is at risk today. And the fact that an authoritarian administration might every once in a while get it right isn't the issue. The issue is overall we must stand for the rule of law.
We're not
and
disagreeing.
one of the tweets we got, I think it was Grassley or someone said the American people voted for this. The Constitution is not something that's up for a vote every 4 years. The Constitution itself is not up for a vote. And so our absolute bedrock loyalty to the principles of the Constitution must be our bottom line. We can argue within that, but we must not in any way withhold our allegiance to those constitutional principles.
I don't disagree. I think the best argument should be concentrated on, do you trust whoever it is, ICE agents or government agents, to just always get it right and to
I don't.
identify. No, I'm not speaking to you. I'm speaking to the American people.
Yeah.
To sell them why the due process matters, because I don't want a situation where the government is just grabbing people and saying, "Oh yeah, you're an illegal gang member, right?" and putting them on some plane. This could happen. There's evidence this has already happened to an American citizen. They didn't put him on a plane, but I saw reporting yesterday about an American citizen being grabbed by ICE and then being like, "What are you doing? I'm an American citizen," and then gets released. We don't want that kind of police state mentality, because I don't have enough faith in the government to get it right. We should spend, before we move on, a little bit of time on that doctor woman who, look, she's just trying to get back into the country, and the government said, nope, you're not coming back because you went to the funeral for a terrorist, and not just as like an onlooker, but someone who was sad about his demise. I'm okay with that.
Well, she said, cause she made a comment, she said, I was mainly supportive of his religious beliefs. She did say that.
Yeah.
But once again, due process, I agree with you that I have some problems with the views of that woman and the pictures in her phone, etc. And at the same time, due process for her must, my father always said, what they can do to anyone, they can do to you. And
Due process, but, as in the case with the Columbia student, right, due process for American citizens, obviously due process, and due process in the standpoint of a criminal matter, even if you're not an American citizen, but in terms of your immigration status, whether you can be let back into the country is a little bit, there's not an absolute right of everyone to just be in this country. Right? They didn't, unlike the Columbia student who they arrested and put in some detention facility, and I objected to, this person was just trying to get back into the country, and they said, no.
Yeah.
They didn't arrest. They didn't. Do you know what I'm saying? It's a little
I
different.
I do. I think what I would wish to see is more people on the right just understanding what the left is saying here, more people on the left just understanding what the right is saying here, because everybody has good points here on both sides of that one. Going back, though, when you were talking about the larger issue of the Venezuelan gangs, when Tom Homan said, we're sending them back regardless what a judge says, that if you're going to talk about impeaching someone, if you're going to talk about getting rid of someone and their political views out of power, I would say Tom Homan, for a comment like that, he has no right to override the power of a district judge.
What I worry about is the Republicans doing this. Right, you can just appeal the decision, eventually get it to the Supreme Court, where you have a conservative supermajority on the court. Sometimes I think I complain about this, Republicans being addicted to losing or doing things in such a way that it's going to not succeed, just so they can complain, just so they can go, oh, look, left-wing active, sorry, we can't give you the policy, the America First policy you want. Left-wing justices are getting in our way because we did this in such a manner that obviously they could thwart us. If we just thought about it a little harder, we could enact this policy. That they don't actually want to enact the policy. They want to complain about things not going their way.
Really?
So they find the only way to do things, despite in a paradigm where Republicans have the presidency, they have the Congress, and they have the Supreme Court. They have more power than they've ever had, and they'll still find the one way to screw this up so they can whine about it on cable news.
That's so interesting that you feel that way, because that's usually what Democrats feel. That's what we feel. Like we had the White House, we had the Senate, we had the House during the first 2 years of Biden, during the first 2 years of Obama. So why didn't we get universal health care? Why didn't we get a raised minimum wage? No Republican president would have said, "Oh, okay, the parliamentarian doesn't want me to do it." So it's interesting to hear you as a Republican, because from a Democratic or a left-wing perspective, we see, well, I look at it anyway, is that the one thing about the Republicans, they see an election, correctly so, as a mandate. They say, we got it, and we're going to use our power. I believe they overreach. I believe they abuse their power. Too often, however, the Republicans the Democrats, we won, and we still won't use the power that the American people granted us, and we're paying a terrible price for that right now. I think that goes back to what you were talking about, Schumer. We were talking about Hakeem Jeffries. Would you show a little power here, guys? Would you show a little force?
I would argue Republicans winning and taking power and then using that power to actually do even some things its base wants is a very new phenomenon. We're seeing it happen for like the first time ever. But
well, we're still,
But maybe.
you know, the people who did not vote for Trump, and he did not win in a landslide. He did not. He won like something like 1%. We still matter too. The fact that someone is your president from an opposing party doesn't mean you don't have any power in this country. And that's what's scary about what's going on with the Trump administration. They want to quiet the voices and quiet the power quite
Democrats
simply,
get
people who don't
pick up
agree.
4, 5 seats in the House, however many it is.
it's gonna be interesting.
Then it'll be divided government, baby.
Josh Weil in Florida. Yes, everybody, Floridians get busy down there. You've got 2 seats that we could pick up. We've got the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And of course, what we're really worried about is the fact that Elon Musk has said that he's threatening even Republicans who will express any disagreement with the president. And by the way, I want to say, going back to this issue of Secret Service and so forth, I heard David Hawley, the former Republican congressman, I think on Stephanie Rule, saying that a lot of times when Republican people in Congress don't go along with the president, it's always been our belief that they're just afraid because they might lose their job. Now, to me, like, hey guys, you're not the only people who have to think about ethical issues at work. But what Holly said was a lot of these people are not just afraid for their jobs, they're afraid in some cases for their lives. He said that, and he's a former Republican congressman. This issue of violence and how important it is.
But their voters want them to go along with President Trump. So it's
well, that's for them to know about their constituents and their. I mean, why then? If that's the case in all instances, then why is it that the Republican National Committee has told these guys not to even have town halls? That doesn't make sense, because not all the people who have been protesting at these Republican town halls are Republicans.
Well, they represent.
Not all of them are
Not
Democrats.
everyone,
I mean,
like
many
you
of them are
said, not
Republicans.
everyone is going. But most Republicans. You're right. There's another half of the country, but most Republicans want the people they vote for to do exactly what President Trump and Elon Musk
Well,
say.
you and I have both agreed, though, it's a co-equal branch of government, and just because a president, if you're a congressman or you're a senator, just because the president
Sure, I'm
said
talking
it,
about their political character. You're saying they're afraid for their lives to oppose Trump. I'm like, no, they're afraid for their jobs, and they should be, because they're people who put them in power
you believe that.
want
I've
them to
always
do what
believed
Trump
that,
wants.
But that's not what Holly said, and I thought Holly brought up a point that is worth repeating. It doesn't make sense that people like Marco Rubio, in going along with everything Trump is saying the opposite of things that he has said for so many years.
It does make sense, because the things he said and believed were not popular with the Republican base.
So he's just changed. So his principles aren't what matter.
Right, no,
at
you
all.
can say he doesn't have
And
no
he works for
principles
the
and he's a
president now.
chameleon and If your criticism is he has no principles and he's an opportunist, and I wouldn't disagree with any of that, but he moved from an unpopular within the Republican coalition ideology to a more popular, and that's why he did it.
Well, I like to see people
like
in politics
you like an
standing up for their
independent streak.
principles and not just this obeisance to one man
How about this,
who's
Marianne?
acting like a dictator, acting like an authoritarian,
this,
and
Marianne?
scaring
I
the
like when-
Jesus out of the rest of us.
I like when people in politics stand up for their principles when I agree with those principles.
Yeah,
and
I
I like
noticed
when
that
they
about you.
cynically and opportunistically betray them when that is according to my principles.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah.
Can America
All
really
clear, everybody.
do good things and don't do bad things, and I don't care about your motivations? Can America really be healthy, however, if it's still dependent on oil? That's what one guest contends. We will debate with her. More Rising right after this.